Hoje eu trouxe um convidado especial para falar com a gente sobre um tema que, sinceramente, ele manda muito bem e ele não tem tantos problemas quanto eu sobre esse tema. Então, por isso eu queria trazer o meu namorado, o Bernardo. Ele fala espanhol, ele é do Paraguai e ele tem algumas ideias bem bacanas para dividir com a gente sobre o nosso tema, autenticidade. Como a gente não ter medo de sermos nós mesmos, de realmente tirar algumas máscaras que a gente não precisa tanto assim usar para que a gente consiga ser, para que nós consigamos ser nós mesmos em mais situações, em outros ambientes, e a gente tem essa confiança. E então eu trouxe algumas perguntas para ele. E como eu falei para vocês, o Bernardo, ele entende português, mas geralmente aqui a gente conversa em inglês, a gente está no Canadá, estudando o nosso doutorado, e então as perguntas eu vou trazer em inglês, mas eu vou deixar a legenda aqui embaixo para vocês, no fim do vídeo, tá? Oi, baby, tudo bom?
Tudo bom?
Como você
Thank
tá
you.
hoje?
Obrigado for having me here in your channel. Thank you for your consideration. I hope I can give insights that are really helpful in this topic. I'm really not an expert on the topic, so I just will talk about my personal experience, what I think. This is not a method. Maybe you shouldn't follow what I say.
I think you should. Eu acho que vocês poderiam considerar assim.
Well, thank you for that.
Não é problema.
I'm a bit nervous.
Eu tô sempre nervosa quando eu gravo os vídeos. I'm always nervous, but I guess it's okay, and I think it's also a good experience to show that even when we're nervous and a little bit out of our, I don't know, comfort zone, we can show ourselves, and that's the purpose for today. I guess besides talking about authenticity and lack of masks in life, also how you portray yourself even when you're nervous. So I think that's where I would like to go today, and you feel free to share your personal experience, examples if you want, or nice stories. I don't know, it's up to you.
Alright.
Então, bem-vindo, Bernardo, ao canal. E a gente pode começar com algumas perguntas. I'll say here in English so that you can understand very well what I'm talking about. So let's go. What is my purpose bringing this video today is because I have always struggled a little bit with myself. Like, how am I gonna show myself to the world? And I grew up in this, let's say, using masks practically my whole life to be nice, to please people. And what I saw that is different from you as my boyfriend, and also we were friends before, so what I've seen in you since the first time we started talking to each other was that you were pretty comfortable with yourself, even when sometimes Bernardo is the kind of person who jokes all the time about many things, and he's very light, he likes comedy. So the first impression I had from Bernardo was that he likes to joke. And sometimes the jokes here in Canada, they can be a little bit, I don't know, sometimes people just don't understand the Latin jokes or something. And that was how I got to know this guy. He was joking. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, he's so okay joking with people. And I am always pleasing people. So how does he do this so naturally? And that was one of the way I got to know him. And that's how we go to a first question that maybe you can think about and share with us. Have you ever been afraid of seeming, I don't know, weird, inappropriate, or even that people just don't like you because of your joke or because of yourself? Have you ever had this insecurity?
All right. Yeah. Well, again, this is not a method that you should follow, guys. I'm just will talk about myself and my experience. I don't think I am like an example that people should follow, but again, maybe the insights would help to people to reflect about themselves. So you were talking initially about masks, yes?
Yeah.
And you are talking, your question is about if if we have fears about
Feeling inappropriate.
interacting with other people, with a group of people.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something normal that we have. Yeah, in essence, we are collective animals.
Mm-hmm.
We grew up in social groups, in our family, our friends, and I think is something normal to try to fit in the group. Yes. Of course, there is the question of how much authentic I am in the group, because maybe if my authenticity is very different from what that group follows, maybe I won't fit in this group.
Yeah.
Just to give a rough example, maybe you want to be friends with people who like heavy metal, but you really, the kind of music that you listen to is funky, is salsa, is cumbia, so it doesn't match with heavy metal.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and you go with this group, and again, just too graphic, and these people say, hey, we shouldn't listen to that music, and you agree with them.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, maybe you are not being honest with yourself, with themselves. Maybe you are lying. Maybe you are masking.
Yeah.
I don't see any issue in show that, hey, I like this music. Like, it's okay if you don't like it, but I like this music. And I think, and maybe this group would say, all right, maybe this group is really locked down in what they believe, so they say, hey, we don't accept people who likes funky. We cannot be friends.
And you're fine
all right,
with that.
that's fine. Yeah, I think when you pretend somebody that you really are not at all, that really goes against your essence, your principles, I think you are betraying yourself at that point. And also, it's kind of obvious.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah,
when somebody is performing.
Yeah, we can tell, right?
Yeah,
we can tell.
Yeah, we can tell. But also at the same time, I think we use masks in different environments.
Yeah.
But also these masks are aligned with who we are. Yeah. If we need to make a presentation in the academy, we more or less dress according to an academic code.
Yeah, that's true.
But let's say, I don't know, you use a t-shirt maybe.
Yeah.
But if you go to a football match, maybe you don't need to dress that seriously.
Yeah.
So you are kind of changing according to the environment, and also your attitudes are changing according to the environment. And you were talking about these jokes, yeah?
Yeah.
So back in my country, with my friends, we joke at all, and we have a more free way to joke because we know each other for such a long time.
Yeah.
And at the beginning, when I arrived here in Canada, I kind of bring this way of being. And at some moment, I didn't measure myself.
Yeah.
And maybe I would go too far. Yeah. I didn't read the context properly, and maybe I would go too far with my jokes. And people here is different. I don't know. I didn't know them very well yet.
Yeah.
So
You just joke.
Maybe I was not that appropriate. But also you can learn, and you can read the environment, the new people, and you can learn to adjust yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, and I assume, like you said about the jokes, that for you to joke, you might be like, let's say, allowing yourself to take the risk of not being accepted in the group. That's my feeling.
Yeah.
You take this
Yeah,
risk.
yeah, or maybe this is a trial also,
It could
an attempt, a tool that you use to measure people.
Yeah.
Maybe they accept the way of
Of
your
your
jokes,
Yeah.
and maybe not. And I think that that's your tool for measuring, and you should learn at that point.
Yeah.
I think the problem would be if you don't learn, if you don't understand
You keep
how
joking.
people react, and you repeat the same once and again.
Yeah.
And
No, but-
yeah, and what, and also this tool like helps you to read the environment. It can be a joke, it can be a comment, it can be talking about a movie,
Yeah.
whatever, yeah.
Yeah.
And also you know if you like them. Like maybe you say, all right, these people is too much for me. Maybe this is not my environment.
Yeah, it's a test for you too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, about like you yourself being yourself. If you match with that group, well or not.
Yeah.
So you're gonna see if
Or
they
if
accept
they
you,
match with you.
or if they match with you, exactly. So it's a choice, I guess, for both sides. But in a sense, like I think that's a good example you brought about like when you arrived in Canada. We arrived in 4 years ago in Canada. So when you arrived, you took the risk of maybe being inappropriate with your jokes so that you could see if you like that environment and if
I
they
guess
accepted you.
a little bit.
And
yeah.
in this sense, like,
I made awkward jokes.
were you afraid of,
yeah.
of
Then,
not being accepted?
yeah, I think I made it too much jokes at the beginning, and then I realized, all right, this is
Canada.
It
This is
doesn't
Canada.
work. Yeah, it
This
doesn't
is
work
not
here.
Latin America.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
still I like the people.
Yeah.
Like, still all right, I like them. I just have to measure myself.
Okay. So it's like it was more like a self-assessment.
Yeah.
But you say it's more like a self-assessment and not precisely fear of being rejected. It's not precisely that. But like, okay, since I'm here, I can adjust. I can I can adjust a little bit who I am.
Yes.
Still, it's me, but I can adjust a little bit according to the context.
Yeah,
More or
totally.
less, that's what you
I would say that. Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
And it worked. Yeah.
Yeah, it did. And
They didn't kicking me off yet.
No, they did not. And today I can tell that I think with these jokes and making the environment light with jokes, like this is your way to bring lightness and softness to the environment. Is bringing jokes, right? That's how you
I
do.
guess so, yeah.
And I think this also creates a good intimacy with people because it creates a bond. I think when we bring softness to the environments, there is a bond. And I can tell that they
I
are
think
our
they-
second
yeah.
family here, right? Don't you think?
Yeah.
So I think it's good. And a second question about this, like, since we're about, like, were you afraid of being accepted or not? I have a question that goes a little bit deeper now. Like, how much do you actually think about what other people might think before you say or do something? Like, to what extent actually people's opinions, they dictate what are you gonna do or what are you gonna say? Do you understand the question? Like,
I think so.
yeah.
I think so.
Like, do you in other words, do you change yourself for because you're afraid of somebody else's opinion, or today you feel more, solid and confident that if you say something and somebody doesn't like, that's okay.
Yeah.
But was it like this in the past or not?
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I think that's a pathway. Yeah, and maybe when you are younger, when you are a teenager, when you are in your 20s, you tend to adapt to that group, to follow that group.
Yeah,
Because
that's true.
you want to be part of the group, you have fun with them. It's super nice to have friends, to meet people and everything. And maybe I was mostly a follower, to say that. But also, I think always is important to have this self-reflection exercise,
Yeah.
just to think about you, what you like to do, what you like to watch on the TV, what you like to read, to eat, everything, which, yeah, this is what who you are. And I think when you think about yourself in that way, also you solidify your identity, you solidify who you are, yeah, in a
Okay.
way.
Like
And-
asking yourself first.
Yeah, I think that it's important to have a mirror. Yeah,
Interesting.
it's important to
Yeah.
have a mirror
Agreed.
to know yourself.
Agreed.
Yeah,
Let me just make a comment on that I think it's important. I say for myself, and I'm quite sure many people are like that too, that most of the times when we grow up and we are so worried about people's opinions, we actually we don't ask ourselves if do we like to be here? Do we like this stuff?
yeah.
Like if this is a test for other
Yeah.
for ourselves too, considering other people.
Yeah.
So I think this step that you're saying, did I ask myself? I think this is a good signal that you're starting to mature also.
Yeah, and also I would say, especially again when you are younger, you are still more shapeable.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true. Yeah.
And also there are people that can influence a lot in you.
Yeah.
I don't know, an uncle, an aunt, a
parents.
friend, yeah, who is admired, so his opinion is very important.
Yeah.
Your parents, can tell you, you should do this, you should study medicine
Yeah.
because
totally.
we know better than you.
Yeah.
And maybe you don't like medicine,
Yeah.
but maybe you do it because you trust in your parents or you want to please them.
Mm-hmm.
And also you are in a phase of your life that you really don't know what you want.
Yeah. True.
And I think that's pretty common.
Lack of self knowledge, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
because what happened to me and many friends when we finish high school is like you are 18, 19 years old and it looks like you have to make the decision of your life. Like that decision that you make there will shape your whole life.
Yeah, going to the university. Yeah,
Going
career.
to the university or start or take a job or
Mm-hmm.
like it looks like this is like the how they call it the turning point
Yeah, exactly.
in your life.
Too much pressure.
And of course there are many things, many factors
Mhm.
around this decision. Yeah. And maybe it's important sometimes just to take a pause
Mhm.
and to think like, do I really want this?
Yeah, like for yourself, like not
Yeah.
not because your
Yeah.
parents or a friend, somebody told you what to do,
Yeah.
but because do you feel that this is you? This
Yeah.
pathway corresponds to yourself, right?
Or maybe make your research. Let's say your parents push you like against the wall and you have to study medicine. And maybe you make a pause for yourself, you think about yourself, but also you are 18, 19 years old, you don't know much about life yet.
Sometimes
Like
you don't even
even
know what to
though
think.
we want to
Well.
look so mature at that age.
Yeah.
And we don't know much. And maybe why not to go to a hospital and see by yourself
How doctors
work,
Yeah.
how physicians work, or maybe ask them.
Yeah.
I don't know, I just put as an example of doing this exercise.
Interesting.
And I remember my mother, she wanted me to study economy.
Mm.
And for some reason I just didn't like this.
Yeah.
I don't know why. And I like more the agricultural side, and I went for agronomy
Mm-hmm.
to the university, and then there I found another career which is called human ecology,
Yeah.
and I felt much more aligned with human ecology
Yeah,
at
inside.
that moment inside. Yeah, but it was kind of an instinct maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say it's a very difficult decision
It is.
at that age.
Yeah, and we tend
Huh.
to get worried about people's opinions to get this decision, I guess so.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and,
it's
and,
hard.
and so yes, people opinions are important in our life.
Yeah.
We consider them, yeah,
Mhm.
for sure. And maybe your parents' opinion are heavier, or maybe a person who is kind of a model for you could be
Yeah.
heavier. But also, as long as you learn to do this self-reflection,
Mhm.
you also discover your identity
Yeah.
in a way. I think it's important also to do other activities. Like,
Mm,
I think art helps. Whatever. Play the keyboard.
yeah.
Painting.
Yeah, I like that.
Whatever. Making videos in a way is a process of creativity,
Mm-hmm.
and when you, in my opinion, yeah, when you do something by yourself, some activity, some activity that requires your input, your thinking, your creativity, I think you are kind of discovering yourself.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Photograph, I don't know, you are discovering yourself, and I think that's a very good exercise to do it frequently.
Yeah.
It's not.
It's kind of a little bit of yourself in each
Yeah.
of these activities.
Yeah,
You
it's kind
discover different parts
yeah.
of yourself. That's
Yeah.
interesting. And from what you said, like as far like as I
Would you
understood.
give me 1 minute?
Yeah. So pause for 5
Pause.
seconds.
Yeah.
No, I wanted to make like just before we pause.
All right.
Just make an assessment of this question. Like we finished this question.
Huh.
This question asking like how much other people's opinions actually influence you, and are you afraid?
I think we
No.
detoured a lot.
No, but that was actually very good because I think you answered the question with many ideas. So I think the first point that I got from this answer is like, first ask yourselves, which is something that seems obvious, but most of the times people pleasers, or I say with property again, sometimes this is the last thing we do. We are just worried about somebody else's opinions and because they have more experience, but we need to ask ourselves inside, does this really align to me? Like, do I really feel I belong in this choice or in this place or in this activity? And the second thing you said about you said to complement this point after asking yourself would be, make your research, because you can have your parents' opinions, you can have your teachers' opinions, but if you have many pillars with different points of view, you can make your assessment much more consolidated. Let's say you have different opinions and you see which of these opinions actually make sense to you. So I think that's a good way not to be too influenced by one opinion or somebody else's opinion, but it's your assessment of different points of view. And I think these are very good suggestions. And you mentioned about arts, which art or like your hobbies as ways for you to little by little learn more from yourself so that you can make a sound assessment of what really you want to do. And when we know what we want to do, what makes sense to us, somebody else's opinions, they might not influence us that hard. So I think these were very good points that I didn't think about. So that's why I say that having videos like this, it's so rich. But let's take 5-minute pause and then we come back.
All right.
Okay.
1 second.
Go. There we go.
Yep. Ready to continue.
Yes, let's continue. So baby, continuing, we were talking about like fear of somebody else's opinion.
Yeah, I just remember something that I wanted to say about it.
Please.
I think it is good. Like, everybody has fears. I think that's totally fine. Everybody has insecurities, like, and I think like it's not about not having them.
Okay.
It's about just to know yourself, to know very well what are your insecurities, what are your fear, and know how to deal with them.
This is like even fear of being yourself.
Yeah, Yeah, I would say.
Yeah,
I would
which
say.
is part. I think everybody is, right?
Yeah, I think we are human beings. We make mistakes and everything. I
Yeah.
think as long as you gain awareness
Mm.
of this stuff, you start to mature them.
Yeah, that's interesting. So this is part also like I think this also answers the previous question because this is another way for us not to be that dependent on somebody else's opinion. It's like it's okay to be afraid to be yourself and admitting that maybe we count too much on somebody else's opinion because we are afraid to have our own opinions. And
Yeah.
that's fine to have this fear.
Totally.
And that's maybe where we have to work next, right?
Mhm.
To understand that it's fine to be
Mhm.
afraid, but that's time to show my voice.
Mhm.
That's nice. Thank you for adding that. And also, I would have the next question is a more practical question, but if you want to answer very like in very few words, like in like a sentence, let's say, what does being yourself actually means to you? What does it mean to be Bernardo? Like you can tell about your characteristics if you want, or if you want to generalize also, like what does it mean to be yourself in general if somebody's listened to you? Do you think you have this answer? What would you say in first hand?
That's a difficult question.
Yeah, I know, it's pretty hard and deep.
Yeah, well, we already said this. Part of being yourself is, in the first place, you know who you are.
Yeah.
If you are lost, if you don't know yourself very well, you cannot be yourself. Yeah, you are the first person who knows you.
Yeah.
Also, I think being yourself is to accept yourself with your mistakes, with your sins,
Yeah.
with your virtues,
Yeah.
with your skills, and to be aware that you are a human being that can do great things, great stuff, but also that you can make mistakes, and this is part of the pathway.
Yeah, I get it. Interesting. So it's like, for you in practice, being yourself is like accepting. It's acceptance. Being yourself is acceptance, and maybe this is where we should start. Self-acceptance, maybe, right?
I think so. Yeah.
I like this way of seeing things.
Yeah, I think when you accept yourself, who you are, in a way you are calmer about yourself. But it doesn't mean that you have to keep doing this stuff. I don't know. Just an example. I am an alcoholic.
Yeah.
I accept that I am an alcoholic.
Yeah.
And now I am calm because I know myself.
Yeah.
Well, alcohol in excess is something that damage your health, that damage other people. So it's something that you have to accept, but also that you have to
of course.
change.
To act.
Yeah, towards improve that.
Yeah.
That issue.
So this means being yourself, like being your most authentic being, doesn't just mean to know who you are and accept who you are, but also keep improving besides that. So in a way, I would say I like this comparison I've seen in a video before, and I thought it was very interesting and correlates to what you're saying. In music, we have the octaves. I don't know how to say this in English. Like you have oitavas. Octavas, yeah. So like, I think what you're saying aligns very well with this idea of the octavas. Like maybe we have our own tone in life, but our tone is here, And once we know ourselves, we accept ourselves, we accept we are this note, let's say, then we can act and improve the same note or essence that we are, and we go a little bit higher in another octave of this same note. So like we learn our voice, our notes, but we can improve in the same essence, but improving who we are today. I think it more or less goes this way. It includes action, right? It includes self-knowledge, acceptance, but action also, correct?
Yeah,
In your view, of course.
I think so. Yeah, like I think how I see life is an everyday learning. Yeah, like it's fun to learn, to know new stuff, to improve your own skills.
Yeah.
But also, it's not about pushing hard and try to be the best human being ever.
Okay.
I think if you have certain issues that are really damaging your health, yourself, the people around you, I think it's important to consider to treat them,
Okay.
yeah, to change that.
Yeah.
But also, I think it's important to know your limitations
Yeah.
and to keep that tone in a way that you don't force yourself. Yeah, that you enjoy
Yeah. That's
yourself and the things that you do. Yeah, I don't know. I like to cook.
Yeah.
I enjoy cooking.
Yeah.
But I don't have any desire to improve my cooking skills. I don't want to be like a chef, a super chef.
You're good
So,
in that level.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe with a friend you learn something new, a new ingredient, something.
Yeah.
But it's not a goal in my life to improve constantly that
I
skill.
get it. Maybe not that skill, but something else that attracts you more. Because I remember just mentioning here that Bernardo read a book, Ikigai, 1% a day, getting better, 1% a day.
I'm reading.
You're still reading, right?
I think you said right.
No, you read.
Yeah, okay, sorry.
Yeah, that you read that, and which I think it's interesting because it applies to what you're saying also. Like, we don't have. Wait,
Kaizen.
Kaizen, Ikigai. No,
Kaizen
sorry, Kaizen. Yeah, Kaizen. So this means we can improve, but we don't have to have that crazy addictive thing about improving. I need to improve from here to here, from a day to the other. So it could be something with pleasure, with softness.
Yeah, I think so.
In this
I think
sense.
so. Yeah,
And become more yourself, but maybe little by little, right?
Yeah,
I think so.
totally.
And one of our last questions here to finish about fear of rejection. So, do you think being authentic requires accepting that some people might simply not like you, and that's okay? Or have you ever felt in your life that you needed to please everyone or something? Have you ever had that?
Do you think there are people that you don't like?
Yeah, for sure.
Huh.
Yeah, for sure.
So there are people in this world that you don't like.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe they just don't match.
Huh.
Yeah.
So there could be also people in this world that don't like you.
Yeah, totally.
Huh.
Totally.
So
So it's fine.
yeah. There are people that don't match with us, and
And
I
that's
think
okay.
that's fine. We don't have to force nothing.
Interesting.
And yeah, like
Do you recall an experience in the past that, I don't know, you met someone, let's say a friend, and you think this friend rocks, let's say, you really like this friend, but this friend is kind of like not, coming back to you. It's kind of like, maybe
yeah, it could be. Yeah, of course, it happens.
it's rejection.
And maybe you want to be a friend with this person, but this person you are not very much in in his system, let's say, in his
Yeah.
galaxy. I don't know how to call it.
Yeah.
And yeah, could be. But I think what I like is also spontaneity. I really appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when the things will happen, they tend to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, like with the person that you aligned, like
Mm-hmm.
naturally you will, when you are in a gathering, naturally maybe you will have a great conversation because you both already like the same things,
It
are kind
goes
of
in
in
a flow.
the same vibe. Yeah, you go with the flow, so
Yeah.
spontaneously,
Interesting.
and it happens. Yeah,
Interesting.
and if you force too much, I don't know, it
You,
looks
you don't
looks,
like that, yeah.
looks magic.
Yeah.
I think so.
So I think just summarizing what you said, which I think it's quite interesting. You might deal, and you correct me if I'm wrong, you might deal with the fear of rejection in a sense that it's okay if someone doesn't like me because spontaneity is something that it's more important to you than to be liked. So let's say if you feel that it just didn't match, you're good with that because you value much more when things get spontaneous than when you force just to be liked.
Yeah, totally.
So you would say
Totally.
spontaneity could be a good way of a new, let's say, perspective to understand rejection and not being that afraid of rejection.
I just think that as we don't like certain people for whatever reason, there must be people that don't like us. Yeah, and I think that's fine. That's totally normal. The only feel of rejection that I have is from my academic committee. I feel that they reject my thesis.
No,
But still, they
please
would
no.
reject my thesis, not me. So
That's a good point. We are studying our PhD together, and I would say that that's a very good. I don't know. That's a big fear that we have for 4 years to be rejected by the professors who are really assessing our work. So I think that's a real fear, like a real big fear.
or be rejected in a job interview.
Or in a job interview. Yeah, but that happens. I think we learn from rejection also, right? So yeah. And just jumping here into something that it's about more relationships. And when I say relationship, I'm not saying just like romantic relationships, but I'm talking about every relationship, including friendships and with your family. Do you think that being with people who accept you makes it easier for you to be more fully yourself? Do you think this is a good way to guide you through yourself? When people accept you for who you are. We can put in romantic relationship also if you want, but yeah.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Not necessarily.
Okay. Why is that?
Because also I don't know. I sing badly. Yeah.
Okay. You say so.
No, yeah, just an example. Let's say I sing really badly.
Okay.
And if everybody around me accepts me and they say, hey, no, you sing very well, maybe I would be feeling an idea that is wrong.
Yeah, but if people around you, they
But
lie.
if your friends
Yeah.
tell you, hey, man, maybe you are not the singer that you think, so you would understand also your limitation.
Yeah.
Maybe you can work on that.
That's
or not, or
true.
whatever. But I think having this
Honesty.
back and forth, this honesty
Yeah.
from people, like acceptance shouldn't be lack of honesty.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But for example, if let's put this example that you just gave. Let's say you sing badly, and I as a girlfriend, this is unacceptable for me. Let's say, just a figurative example. I don't accept that and I break up with you. So in a certain sense, I didn't accept one limitation of yours, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think, let's say, if I tell you, okay, you don't sing well, but that's okay, you have other qualities.
Yeah.
I think you also might feel comfortable around people who see you for who you are and accept these qualities,
I see.
or the negative
see.
sides also. Sometimes,
Yeah.
yeah. I don't know. In my case, for example, I could have, and you know, I shared in the channel before, but I might have problems sometimes accepting mistakes, or you know, or I want to be like to be the best in everything, and I don't accept my limitations sometimes, right?
All right.
And when you come to me and you say, hey, you have this problem, but I know you can handle that, I guess that's a way for me to feel more comfortable around you, and because I know that I have this difficulty in life,
Great.
but I
see.
know
I
you
see.
see this in me, but you know that I am a human being too. Anyways, this is just an example, but I think in a certain sense it helps, because if people around us, they don't accept even our mistakes, it's pretty hard for us to keep in that relationship and improve, you know, grow in that relationship. I would say.
Yeah. I see.
Yeah, but that's okay. And we can go for a closing reflection, and
Right.
that's something that I would like you to talk to people who watch this video, people who I really care about, who is here. And the question is, what would you say to someone who feels like they are constantly performing a version of themselves in order to be accepted? So like, think that you're talking to someone who uses masks.
All right.
Well, and let's say this person comes to you for an advice. What would you tell
All right.
to this person?
Well, if somebody comes to me for an advice,
Please.
that's not a good advice. That people come to me for advice. Well, whatever.
Or your words, your perspectives, I don't know.
Yeah. Again, this is like a very personal. Okay, it's again not something. It's food for thought.
Okay.
Food for thought. Personally, I remember a few times in my life that I have interact with friends or people that are you see that they are performing, that they are not totally themselves.
Yeah.
I feel I don't like it too much.
Okay.
I don't like that attitude too much. I really appreciate more when somebody shows us it is.
Yeah, the person
Yeah,
who they are.
Yeah, I really that's I appreciate more when somebody is authentic.
Yeah.
And what I would say is I let's say this is myself when I was a teenager.
Yeah, talking to yourself.
Yeah, and I would say that it's like every human being, including you, is great. It has value. It has something beautiful to develop and to show to the world, and it's just about finding what you like, what you feel comfortable with, and cultivating that
to be more
that
confident.
principle, that skill, that learning, and it's much more how to say enjoyable.
Interesting, right?
A person who is
Yeah.
confident about himself or herself. So being yourself is much more interesting than seeing you performing somebody that you are not, because you cannot do that.
Yeah.
Like if you are not that character that you want to perform,
Yeah.
you will see always flaws because you are not that character.
Yeah, and, but I also I think also in what you're saying, like I think in life, let's say when we are kids, we learn to put on masks. Let's say for survival, let's say in our household, we were not accepted, or we needed to, I don't know, to please our parents, because the environment was not emotionally healthy. So we learn sometimes in our childhood to put on masks.
Totally. Yeah.
But I think what you said is a message for the adult who is here listening, that we're not kids living in unhealthy environments anymore, or at least we should not be at this point. And like, of course, there is always a space for improvement, but the adult has the option to leave this survival mode and these masks that we put on and learn to live a new life. And I think that matches very well with what you said. In the past, when we were kids, or maybe living in, let's say, dangerous environment, emotionally speaking, it was okay to have the mask. But today, maybe this mask is not showing who you are, and it's not interesting for the person who is listening to you, or even for yourself, right? So it's time to learn to live a new life and learn how to be more authentic, because something inside has value. And that's what you said. We have to cultivate what has value inside, and this would be a proof of more authenticity from ourselves, and that will make us more interesting, correct?
Totally.
That's what you said.
I agree with you.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I just wanted to make the point that sometimes we learn the mask. It's not that we are using the mask just because we want. It's because like this was decades of using masks, and now it's a brand new day, a brand new opportunity to learn to be a little bit more ourselves and learn what sparkles inside, right? And show this to the world. Do you agree with that too?
No, totally. Yeah. Authenticity is beautiful.
Yeah, and we can learn, right? We can learn. I think from all this conversation today, I get that the main point for me, from your perspective of authenticity, is that self-knowledge. And when you mentioned it particularly about arts for us, right? But there could be something, another hobby or something else that you find that sparkles in your heart.
Yeah.
I think learning ourselves a little bit in something else, which could be arts or could be something else like studies, I don't know. These self-knowledge, and mainly from your message today, self-acceptance. So learning a little bit more about ourselves and accepting the bad and the good that there is inside. So I guess these could be good starting points for someone who wants to drop the mask for real right now and start living a little bit more like yourself. Yes, let's remove the mask and try to be more ourselves in different contexts, right? Thank you.
No, thank you. Great conversation.
That was great, baby. Thank you so much, and thank you for being here, and I hope you have learned from this beautiful face, and also...
Obrigado, pessoal.
Thank you so much. Muito obrigada a vocês que ficaram até aqui. Vocês gostaram do que o Bernardo dividiu com vocês? Podem falar aqui, eu ia gostar muito de ler, o Bernardo também. E se vocês tiverem outras ideias de vídeos, só manda por aqui que a gente pode trazer mais vídeos também, tá? E a gente se vê no próximo vídeo aqui do canal.
Bye, senhor.
Tchau, tchau, pessoal!